I'm Garrett Whitmore, 47, a successful financial advisor who thought I had built the perfect life. For 20 years, I loved my wife Celeste unconditionally and raised our son Blake as my own flesh and blood. Last Tuesday, during what started as a routine argument about Blake's college expenses, Celeste's voice cracked, and she whispered the words that shattered my entire world. "He's not even yours." Garrett, 20 years of love, sacrifice, and devotion, all built on a lie. The betrayal didn't just break my heart, it ignited something darker inside me. But Celeste made one crucial mistake. She underestimated exactly how much power a man in my position holds when he decides to use it. What she confessed next would change everything. And what I discovered about her secret life would give me all the ammunition I needed. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, subscribe for more stories of truth and justice. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. I stared at Celeste, searching her face for any sign that this was some cruel joke, some momentary lapse in judgment. But the guilt written across her features told me everything I needed to know. My hands trembled as I reached for the kitchen counter, needing something solid to anchor me to reality. The wedding photo from 1985 stared back at me from its silver frame. Young Celeste in white, me in my navy suit, both of us beaming with what I thought was genuine love. That photo had sat in the same spot for 2 decades, a constant reminder of our beginning. Now it felt like evidence of the longest con ever played. "Garrett, please!" Celeste started, her voice breaking. "Don't!" The word came out sharper than I intended. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel cables around my ribs and was slowly tightening them. "Just don't say anything right now." I walked to the living room, my legs moving without conscious thought. Everything looked the same. The leather sectional we'd picked out together 5 years ago. Blake's high school graduation photo on the mantel. The oak coffee table where we'd shared countless Sunday morning newspapers. But it all felt foreign now, like I was seeing someone else's life. Blake. God, Blake. My mind immediately went to our son. No, not my son. The correction hit like a physical blow. I thought about teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, cheering at his baseball games. Was any of it real? Did any of those moments belong to me? "How long have you known?" I asked without turning around. Celeste's footsteps approached cautiously. "Garrett, how long have you known he wasn't mine?" I repeated, my voice eerily calm. The silence stretched until I thought I might scream. Finally she whispered, "Since the beginning, 20 years. 20 years of living a lie, of raising another man's child while believing he was mine. 20 years of Celeste looking me in the eye every morning, kissing me goodnight, letting me pour my heart and soul into a family built on deception." I turned to face her, and the woman I'd loved for over 2 decades suddenly looked like a stranger. Her blonde hair was disheveled, mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her confession. "Who is he?" I asked. She flinched at the question. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Celeste wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture I'd seen countless times when she was nervous about something. Now I wondered how many of those moments had been lies too. "We can work through this," she said desperately. "We can go to counseling. Who is Blake's father?" I interrupted, my patience evaporating. The look on her face told me I wasn't going to like the answer. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, memories flooded back with painful clarity. Blake's first steps in our living room, his chubby hands reaching for me as he wobbled forward. His first word, "Dada," spoken with such pure trust. The pride I'd felt in that moment now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I found myself standing in Blake's old bedroom at 3 a.m, staring at the baby footprints we'd made when he was born. They were framed on his desk, those tiny purple prints on white paper that had seemed so precious. Our little miracle, Celeste had called him. I remembered how I'd cried when I first saw those prints, overwhelmed by love for this tiny person who was supposedly half me. How many fathers look at their newborn's features, searching for resemblances? I'd done it constantly with Blake. "He has your eyes," people would say, and I'd beam with pride. "Definitely got your stubborn streak," others would joke when Blake was being difficult. I'd collected those comments like treasures, proof of our biological connection. Now I realized I'd been seeing what I wanted to see. Blake's dark hair, so different from my sandy brown. His athletic build that neither Celeste nor I possessed. His musical talent that seemed to come from nowhere. I'd attributed it all to recessive genes, to some distant relative, to anything but the obvious truth. The worst part was remembering the moments when I'd felt closest to him. Teaching him to shave when he was 14, having those awkward conversations about girls, helping him prepare for his driver's test. He'd looked up to me with such admiration, calling me his role model. "I want to be just like you, Dad," he'd said on more than one occasion. But I wasn't his dad. Not really. I was just the man who'd been fooled into paying the bills. I heard movement downstairs and found Celeste in the kitchen, making coffee with shaking hands. She looked like she'd aged a decade overnight. "I know you hate me," she said without looking up. "I don't know what I feel," I admitted. And it was true. The anger was there, burning hot beneath the surface. But it was tangled up with grief, confusion, and a deep sense of loss that went beyond betrayal. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The affair, I mean." "It was just what?" I asked, surprising myself with how level my voice sounded. "Just a mistake? Just something that happened? Just 20 years of lying to me about the most important thing in our lives?" She flinched at each word. "You have to understand, when I found out I was pregnant, he was already gone. He'd ended things and moved away. I was terrified and alone. And then you proposed and you saw an opportunity," I finished for her. "I saw a man I loved who would be a wonderful father," she protested. "And you have been, Garrett. You've been the best father Blake could have asked for." The words should have comforted me, but they only made the betrayal sting worse. Because she was right. I had been a good father. I'd poured everything into raising Blake, sacrificing career opportunities, working overtime to pay for his expensive tastes, staying up all night when he was sick. And for what? To raise another man's son while that man lived his life free of responsibility? "Tell me about him," I said, Celeste's hand stilled on her coffee mug. "Garrett, tell me about Blake's real father," I insisted. "I think I've earned the right to know." She was quiet for so long, I thought she might refuse. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "His name is Marcus Caldwell." The name hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Marcus Caldwell, my former business partner, the man I'd trusted with my clients, my reputation, my friendship. "Marcus," I repeated, the word tasting like poison in my mouth. Celeste nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I know how this looks. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "How this looks is that my wife had an affair with my business partner and then let me raise his child for 20 years while he disappeared from the consequences." The memories came flooding back. Marcus and I had started our financial advisory firm together straight out of college. We'd been best friends, brothers in everything but blood. I'd been his best man at his wedding, and he'd been mine. We'd dreamed of building an empire together, of retiring early and spending our golden years as neighbors, watching our kids grow up together. Then suddenly, he'd wanted out. Said he was moving to California for a better opportunity. I'd been hurt, confused by his abrupt departure, but I'd wished him well. I'd even helped him dissolve our partnership on favorable terms because that's what friends did for each other. Now I understood the real reason he'd fled. "He knew," I said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," Celeste whispered. "He knew you were pregnant with his child and he ran." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I demanded, my carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Explain to me how it wasn't exactly like that." Celeste's hands trembled as she set down her coffee cup. When I told him about the pregnancy, he panicked. He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that his marriage was already struggling, that he needed time to think. "But then you proposed and I thought, you thought you'd found a better option," I said coldly. "I thought you'd be a better father," she corrected, and I was right. Marcus wasn't ready for a child. He would have been a terrible father. "But that wasn't your choice to make," I said, my voice rising. "You didn't get to decide that I'd unknowingly raise another man's child. You didn't get to rob me of the choice to have my own biological children. You didn't get to make Marcus disappear from his responsibilities while I picked up the tab." The business card from Marcus's old firm was still in my desk drawer. Caldwell and Associates. I'd kept it all these years, a memento of our friendship. Now it felt like evidence of the deepest betrayal imaginable. "Where is he now?" I asked. "I don't know," Celeste said quickly. "Too quickly. Don't lie to me. You've lied enough for several lifetimes." She looked away, confirming my suspicion. She knew exactly where Marcus was, and more importantly, she'd been in contact with him. "Has he been sending money?" I asked, the financial advisor in me immediately thinking about the practical implications. Her silence was answer enough. "How much?" I pressed. "It's not what you think. How much has Marcus been paying you over the years?" When she finally answered, her voice was barely audible. $500 a month for Blake's expenses. $500 a month. 12 years of payments, since Blake turned 8 and started getting more expensive. $60,000 that Marcus had been quietly contributing to his son's upbringing while I'd been footing the major bills. Blake's private school tuition, his sports equipment, his car, his college fund. I'd paid for all of it. Thinking I was investing in my son's future, I'd been financing my own cuckolding. Did Blake know? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. No, Celeste said firmly. He's never known about Marcus or the money. That at least was a relief. Whatever else had happened, Blake was innocent in all of this. He'd been raised believing I was his father, and despite the biological truth, that relationship was real to him, but the betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about an affair or even about paternity fraud. This was about a systematic deception that had shaped every major decision in my life for 20 years. Marcus had contributed just enough to ease his conscience, while letting me carry the real burden of parenthood. Thought about all the sacrifices I'd made for Blake's future, the promotions I'd turned down because they required travel, the investment opportunities I'd passed up to ensure his college fund was secure, the vacations Celeste and I had skipped to pay for his hockey league. Marcus had been living his consequence-free life in California while I'd been playing father to his son. That was about to change. The next morning, I did what I do best. I followed the money. 23 years as a financial advisor had taught me that people's true intentions are always revealed in their financial habits. Every transaction tells a story, and I was about to read the story of my marriage with the cold precision of a forensic accountant. I started with our joint checking account, pulling up 20 years of bank statements on my laptop. The Marcus payments were easy to spot once I knew what to look for. Monthly deposits of $500, always from a different account but with consistent timing. They'd started in 2016, just after Blake turned 8, but that was just the beginning. Hidden among routine transactions, I found patterns that made my blood run cold. Unexplained cash withdrawals, always in amounts just under the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Credit card payments for purchases that had never appeared on our statements. Celeste had been living a double life, and she'd been funding it with our money. I cross-referenced the mysterious transactions with her calendar, her travel schedule, her claimed activities. The picture that emerged was damning. Weekend girls' trips that coincided with large cash withdrawals. Shopping excursions that resulted in credit card charges to restaurants and hotels. Business conferences that she'd attended, but that had no record of her registration. The most damning evidence was in her separate savings account, one I'd known about but had never monitored closely. It was supposed to be for personal expenses, her fun money account, but the deposits told a different story. Beyond Marcus's monthly contributions, there were irregular deposits from other sources. Larger amounts, sometimes thousands at a time. The account currently held over $40,000 that had never been declared as joint assets. I printed everything, organizing the evidence with the methodical precision that had made me successful in my career. Bank statements, credit card records, account transfers, unexplained deposits. It was all there in black and white. 20 years of financial deception. But the most shocking discovery came when I accessed our life insurance policies. 6 months ago, Celeste had increased her policy on my life to $2 million. She'd forged my signature on the application, something I only discovered when I called the insurance company directly. The timing wasn't coincidental. Blake would be starting college soon, an expensive proposition that had been weighing on our finances. Marcus's $500 a month wouldn't cover Stanford tuition, but $2 million certainly would. I sat back in my home office, surrounded by printed evidence of systematic betrayal, and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about an affair or even about raising another man's child. This was about being slowly, methodically stripped of everything I'd worked for while being positioned as an insurance payout. My phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. Gone to Mom's for a few days. Need time to think. Perfect. That would give me time to think too. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago, but never thought I'd need to use personally. Catherine Voss Law Office. How may I help you? This is Garrett Whitmore. I need to schedule an emergency consultation with Catherine. It's about a divorce. Catherine Voss was the most ruthless family law attorney in the state, known for her scorched earth tactics and her ability to find hidden assets. I'd referred several clients to her over the years when their divorces had financial complications. Now I was about to become her client. How soon can you see me? I asked. She has an opening this afternoon at 3. The receptionist replied. I'll take it. I hung up and looked at the mountain of evidence spread across my desk. Celeste thought she'd been clever, managing her deceptions with small amounts and careful timing. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd betrayed a financial advisor. Catherine Voss's office was exactly what I'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling law books, mahogany furniture, and an atmosphere that whispered expensive competence. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that could cut glass. Her business card, embossed with gold lettering, sat prominently on her desk between us like a declaration of war. "So," she said, reviewing the financial documents I'd brought, "your wife of 20 years has admitted that your son isn't biologically yours, has been receiving secret payments from the biological father, has hidden assets, and recently increased your life insurance without your knowledge." "That's correct." She looked up from the papers, and I saw something that might have been admiration flicker across her features. "Most men in your situation come to me emotional and unprepared. You've done excellent preliminary work. I'm a financial advisor. I know how to follow money trails." "Good. That will save us time and you money." She leaned back in her leather chair. "Let's talk about your options. In this state, adultery is still grounds for fault-based divorce, which can affect asset division and alimony. The paternity fraud adds another dimension, particularly regarding your financial obligations to Blake." "What about Blake?" I asked. This was the part that worried me most. "Complicated. You've acted as his father for 20 years, which establishes you as the presumptive father, regardless of biology. However, the deception regarding paternity could impact custody arrangements and future financial obligations." She pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. "The hidden assets are actually the most promising avenue. If we can prove systematic financial deception, particularly the forged insurance documents, we can argue for fraud, which would entitle you to significant compensation." "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "That depends on how cooperative your wife chooses to be. If she fights this, we could be looking at a year or more of litigation. If she's smart, she'll settle quickly and quietly." Catherine's tone suggested she hoped Celeste would choose to fight. Litigation was clearly her preferred battlefield. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Everything. Bank records, credit card statements, tax returns, investment accounts, property deeds, insurance policies. I want a complete financial picture. Also, I'm going to recommend we hire a private investigator to document any ongoing relationship with the biological father." She slid a retainer agreement across the desk. The fee was substantial, but I'd expected that. Good legal representation wasn't cheap, and Catherine was the best. "One more thing," I said as I signed the paperwork. "I want Marcus Caldwell held accountable, too. He owes 20 years of back child support." Catherine's smile was sharp. "Now you're speaking my language. We can file against him for retroactive child support based on his acknowledgement of paternity through those monthly payments. California has reciprocal enforcement agreements with our state." I felt a grim satisfaction as I wrote the retainer check. For 20 years I'd been playing defense, unknowingly managed and manipulated by Celeste and Marcus. Now it was time to go on offense. "How long before we can file?" I asked. "Give me a week to review everything and develop our strategy. Then we move fast and hard." I stood to leave, but Catherine's voice stopped me at the door. "Mr. Whitmore, in my experience, the spouse who controls the money usually wins the divorce. Make sure you maintain control of your accounts." The advice was unnecessary. I'd already moved our joint savings into accounts that required both signatures for withdrawals. Celeste's credit cards were about to be canceled, and her access to our business accounts was being revoked as soon as I returned to the office. 20 years too late, I was finally protecting myself from my wife. The hardest conversation of my life happened on a Thursday evening in Blake's dorm room at Stanford. I'd driven the 6 hours without telling Celeste, needing to have this discussion away from her influence and manipulation. Blake opened the door with his usual grin, but it faded when he saw my expression. "Dad, what's wrong?" "You look terrible. We need to talk," I said, stepping into his small single room. The space was typically collegiate: unmade bed, textbooks scattered everywhere, empty pizza boxes stacked by the door. Normal. Everything about this felt so normal, which made what I had to do even harder. He gestured to his desk chair while he sat on the bed, concern written across his features. Looking at him now, I could see it: the nose that wasn't quite mine, the jawline that had always seemed slightly off, the athletic build that neither Celeste nor I possessed. How had I been so blind? "Blake, I need to tell you something that's going to be very difficult to hear." His face immediately tensed. "Are you sick? Is Mom okay?" "Your mother and I are getting divorced." He absorbed this with surprising composure. "I kind of figured that might happen eventually. You guys haven't seemed happy for a while." That stung, but he was right. "There's more. The reason for the divorce is complicated, and it involves you." Now he looked confused. Me? What did I do? I pulled out the DNA test results I'd ordered the week before. The laboratory envelope was still crisp, the contents devastating in their scientific certainty. I had a DNA test done. Blake, you're not my biological son. The words hung in the air between us. Blake stared at the papers, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and then something approaching horror. What do you mean? He whispered. Your mother had an affair 20 years ago. She's known since you were born that I wasn't your biological father, but she never told me. Blake's hands shook as he took the test results. I watched him read the summary, watched the moment when the scientific reality hit him. His face went pale, and for a terrifying second I thought he might be sick. So you're not my dad, he said finally, his voice hollow. I'm absolutely your dad, I said firmly. Biology doesn't change the fact that I've been your father for 20 years. I taught you to ride a bike, helped you with homework, cheered at every game, worried about you every day of your life. That's what makes someone a father. His eyes filled with tears. But it's not real. None of it's real. It's the most real thing in my life, I insisted, moving to sit beside him on the bed. You are my son in every way that matters. This doesn't change how I feel about you. Who is he? Blake asked. My biological father? I hesitated, but he deserved the truth. Marcus Caldwell. He was my business partner before you were born. Do I know him? No. He left town when your mother got pregnant. He's been sending money over the years, but he's never tried to contact you or be part of your life. Blake was quiet for a long time, processing everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was angry. She lied to both of us. Yes. For my entire life. Yes. He stood up abruptly, pacing the small room. How could she do that? How could she let me believe? He stopped, turning to face me. Do you hate me now? The question broke my heart. Blake, listen to me very carefully. I could never hate you. You are my son. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And that's not going to change because of some DNA test. But every time you look at me, you'll think about her betrayal. When I look at you, I think about 20 years of loving you. I think about your first steps, your first day of school, teaching you to drive. I think about how proud I am of the man you've become. He was crying now, and so was I. What happens now? Now we figure out how to move forward. Your mother and I are getting divorced, but that doesn't change anything between us. I'm still going to pay for your college. I'm still going to be here for you. I'm still your dad. What about him? Marcus, what about him? Does he want to meet me? I hadn't considered this possibility. I don't know. Would you want to meet him? Blake was quiet for a long moment. I don't know either. Part of me is curious, but part of me is angry that he abandoned us. He knew about me and chose not to be involved. That's his loss, I said. His choice to leave doesn't reflect on you at all. Are you going to tell him that I know? Probably. He owes 20 years of child support, and my attorney is going after him for it. Blake's smile was grim. Good. If he wanted to send guilt money, he should have sent a lot more. Despite everything, I laughed. That was my son. Practical, fair-minded, with a strong sense of justice. Biology or no biology, he was definitely my kid in the ways that mattered. I love you. Blake, I said, I love you too, Dad. And in that moment, I knew that whatever else this divorce destroyed, it wouldn't destroy this relationship. Celeste's lies had cost me my marriage, but they wouldn't cost me my son. Raymond Cross looked like exactly what he was. A retired police detective turned private investigator. He was 60-something with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of too many sleepless nights spent watching people at their worst. His report, bound in a manila folder on my desk, represented 3 weeks of meticulous surveillance. Your wife is either very careless or very confident, he said, sliding the folder across to me. She's made no attempt to hide her activities. I opened the folder, and the first thing I saw was a photograph of Celeste sitting across from a man at an upscale restaurant in downtown. The man was older than in my memories, gray at the temples, laugh lines around his eyes, but unmistakably Marcus Caldwell. How many times have they met? I asked. Documented. 7 times in the past 3 weeks. Always public places, restaurants, coffee shops, the botanical gardens. They're not trying to hide the meetings themselves, just the content of their conversations. I flipped through more photographs. Marcus and Celeste walking through the park. Marcus handing her an envelope outside a Starbucks. Celeste getting into Marcus's luxury sedan, a Mercedes S-Class that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. The financial exchanges are interesting, Raymond continued. He's been giving her cash beyond the regular $500. Larger amounts. My guess is he's helping fund her legal defense. That made sense. Celeste had retained Thomas Brennan, one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the state. I'd wondered how she planned to pay his retainer on her limited income. Now I knew. There's more, Raymond said, his tone suggesting I wasn't going to like what came next. I followed him to his hotel. He's staying at the Fairmont downtown presidential suite. Been there for 2 weeks. He's in town for 2 weeks and didn't think to call his son. Apparently not. But here's the interesting part. He's not alone. Raymond pulled out another photograph. Marcus with a younger woman, maybe early 30s, blonde, clearly expensive in the way that only mistresses and trophy wives managed to be. His wife? I asked. No. I ran a background check. His wife divorced him 3 years ago. Took half of everything, which was considerable. This is girlfriend number 3 since then, according to my sources in California. So Marcus was funding Celeste's legal defense while maintaining his current relationship. The hypocrisy was staggering, but it also gave me leverage. What else do you have? Raymond's smile was grim. Financial records. Marcus's California business is struggling. He's over-leveraged on several properties, behind on taxes, and those alimony payments to his ex-wife are substantial. The money he's been sending Celeste and the cash he's giving her now, it's money he doesn't really have. This was getting better and better. How much detail do you have? Enough to know that if someone filed a child support claim for 20 years of back payments, it would probably bankrupt him. I thought about Marcus's comfortable life in California, his expensive car, his young girlfriend, his presidential suite, all of it built while I'd been raising his son and footing the real bills. There's one more thing, Raymond said, pulling out a final photograph. I had a contact at the hotel check the phone records from his room. He's been making regular calls to a number in Switzerland. Switzerland? Bank account, most likely. He's been moving money offshore, probably anticipating legal trouble. The photograph showed Marcus on his hotel balcony, phone pressed to his ear, city lights sparkling behind him. He looked relaxed, confident. A man who thought he'd covered all his bases. He was wrong. I want you to document everything, I told Raymond. Every meeting, every financial transaction, every phone call you can legally monitor. And see if you can find out more about those Swiss accounts. Already on it, he said, standing to leave. Your wife and her ex-lover are about to discover that 20 years of consequences are finally coming due. After Raymond left, I sat alone with the photographs spread across my desk. 20 years ago, Marcus had fled rather than face responsibility for his actions. He'd built a new life while I'd unknowingly cleaned up his mess. Now he was back, trying to manipulate the situation to his advantage once again. But this time, he wasn't dealing with a naive young man who trusted too easily. This time, he was dealing with someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. The call came on a Saturday morning while I was reviewing legal documents. The number was unknown, but when I answered, the voice was instantly recognizable despite 20 years of separation. Garrett, it's Marcus. Marcus Caldwell. I think we need to talk. My hand tightened on the phone. I think we needed to talk 20 years ago. I know you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover what I am. There was a pause. I'm in town. I'd like to meet, explain things. There's a lot you don't understand. I understand that you got my wife pregnant and ran away like a coward. It's more complicated than that. Then explain it. But not over the phone. If you want to talk, we do it face to face. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. I arrived early and chose a corner table where I could see the entrance. When Marcus walked in, I was struck by how little he'd changed. Still tall and lean. Still carried himself with that confident swagger that had made him successful in business. His watch caught the light as he moved, a Rolex Submariner that probably cost $40,000. He spotted me and approached with what he probably thought was a conciliatory smile. Garrett, you look good. I didn't stand, didn't offer to shake hands. Sit down, Marcus. He settled across from me, and for a moment we just stared at each other. 20 years of friendship, partnership, and betrayal compressed into an uncomfortable silence. I know what you're thinking, he said finally. I doubt that. You're thinking I abandoned you and Celeste, that I ran away from my responsibilities, didn't you? Marcus leaned back in his chair. It wasn't that simple. My marriage was falling apart. Sarah was threatening divorce if she found out about the affair. I had 2 kids to think about, a business to protect. I made the choice that seemed best for everyone. Best for everyone except the child you fathered. I made sure he was taken care of. I've been sending money, $500 a month, I interrupted, while I paid for everything else. Private school, sports equipment, medical bills, college tuition. You think $500 a month covers your obligation? His jaw tightened. I did what I could afford. Bullshit. I know exactly what you can afford, Marcus. I know about the properties in California, the expensive cars, the young girlfriend staying in your presidential suite at the Fairmont. The confidence flickered in his eyes. You've been having me watched. I've been protecting my interests. Something I should have done 20 years ago. Look, I know this is difficult. Difficult? I leaned forward. You want to know what's difficult? Difficult is finding out the son you've raised and loved for 20 years isn't biologically yours. Difficult is discovering your wife has been lying to you every single day for 2 decades. Difficult is realizing your best friend betrayed you in the worst possible way and then disappeared. Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. I know I handled things badly back then. You didn't handle things at all. You ran. I'm here now. Why? After 20 years of silence, why are you here now? He hesitated, and I saw something calculated in his expression. Blake's an adult now. I thought maybe it was time he knew about me, time we had a relationship. Now that the hard work of raising him is done, you want to swoop in and play father? I am his father. The words hit like a slap. No, Marcus. You're his sperm donor. I'm his father. I'm the one who was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every important moment of his life. You forfeited any claim to fatherhood when you chose to disappear. That's not how biology works. This isn't about biology. This is about responsibility, commitment, love. Things you clearly don't understand. Marcus's facade was slipping now, revealing something harder underneath. I have legal rights, Garrett. Blake is my son, and I have a right to a relationship with him. Legal rights? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let's talk about legal rights. You owe 20 years of back child support. California guidelines would put that at around $300,000, plus interest. My attorney is preparing to file claims in both states. The color drained from his face. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You want to claim parental rights? Then you can start by paying what you owe. I don't have that kind of money. Then you shouldn't have fathered a child you weren't prepared to support. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. What do you want, Garrett? I want you to disappear. Again. Permanently this time. I can't do that. Why not? You managed it just fine 20 years ago. Because Blake deserves to know who his real father is. I stood up, done with the conversation. Blake already knows who his real father is. He knows it's the man who raised him, loved him, and sacrificed for him, not the coward who ran away. As I walked toward the door, Marcus called after me. This isn't over, Garrett. I turned back to face him. You're right. It's not over. It's just beginning. And this time, I'm not the naive friend you can manipulate and abandon. This time, I'm going to make sure you face every consequence you've been avoiding for 20 years. The last thing I saw was Marcus staring at his expensive watch, finally understanding that his time had run out. Monday morning brought clarity in the form of corporate documents spread across my desk. The company incorporation papers for Whitmore Financial Services told a story that even Celeste's expensive attorney couldn't argue with. Everything was in my name. When I'd started the business after Marcus's departure, I'd been so focused on moving forward that I'd structured everything for maximum control and minimum complications. The house, the investment accounts, the business assets, even Blake's college fund, all of it legally belonged to me, established during our marriage but titled solely in my name. Catherine had been right when she'd said the spouse who controls the money usually wins the divorce. My assistant knocked and entered with my morning coffee. Your wife called, she said carefully. She wants to schedule a meeting. Tell her to call my attorney. She said it was urgent. Something about Blake's tuition payment being due. I almost smiled. Celeste was starting to understand her position. Stanford's spring semester payment was due in 2 weeks. $45,000 that she couldn't access without my approval. 20 years of marriage. And she'd never paid attention to our financial structure. She'd been content to spend while I managed, never questioning how accounts were titled or who had signing authority. That comfortable ignorance was about to become very expensive for her. My phone buzzed with a text from Blake. Mom's freaking out about tuition. Says the account is frozen. I called him immediately. The account isn't frozen. I just moved the money to protect it during the divorce proceedings, so I can still finish school. Of course. Nothing about this affects your education. That's a promise. There was relief in his voice. Mom's been calling me all morning crying about how you're going to ruin her life. Your mother made choices that led to consequences. I'm not ruining her life. I'm protecting what I've worked for. After hanging up with Blake, I reviewed the asset inventory Catherine had prepared. The numbers were staggering when laid out comprehensively. Our house was worth $800,000. My business was valued at $1.2 million. Investment accounts totaled nearly $2 million. Blake's education fund held another $250,000. Total marital assets, just over $4 million. All of it accumulated through my work, my planning, my sacrifice. Celeste had contributed nothing beyond spending what I earned and lying about the fundamental facts of our family. Under normal circumstances, she'd be entitled to half in the divorce. But these weren't normal circumstances. Adultery, fraud, and systematic deception changed the equation dramatically. My phone rang. Catherine's office. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. Celeste's attorney filed a motion for temporary spousal support and immediate access to marital funds. "They're claiming you're financially abusing her by restricting access to accounts." "Can they win that?" "Possibly. Judges don't like it when one spouse suddenly cuts off the other's access to money, even in divorce proceedings." "What do you recommend?" "We give her enough to live on, but nothing more. Demonstrate that you're being reasonable while maintaining control, and we accelerate our timeline. I want to file the fraud charges this week." After the call, I sat in my office looking out at the city where I'd built my success. Every client relationship, every investment decision, every sacrifice had been made with the belief that I was building something for my family. Now I understood I'd been building it for myself, and for Blake, the son who might not share my DNA but who shared my values. Celeste could fight for half of what I'd earned, but she'd have to explain 20 years of lies to get it. Marcus could claim parental rights, but he'd have to pay 20 years of back support first. They'd both underestimated what happens when you betray someone who understands exactly how money and power work. I picked up my phone and called my investment advisor. "I want to restructure Blake's education fund. Make it an irrevocable trust with me as sole trustee." "Any particular reason for the urgency?" "I'm getting divorced, and I want to make sure my son's future is protected no matter what happens." 20 minutes and one phone call later, Blake's college fund was beyond Celeste's reach forever. One down, several million to go. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the incorporation papers again. Such simple documents, but they represented the difference between being a victim and being in control. For 20 years, I'd been playing by rules I didn't know existed. Now I was writing new rules, and everyone else would have to learn how to play by them. The love letters were hidden in a shoebox at the back of Celeste's closet, underneath old photo albums and forgotten Christmas decorations. I found them while packing her belongings, too. Decades of correspondence that painted a picture of sustained, emotional betrayal far beyond what I'd imagined. The earliest letter was, dated 6 months after Blake's birth, written in Marcus's familiar handwriting on expensive stationery. "My dearest Celeste, I think about you and our son every day. I know this situation is impossible, but please know that my feelings for you haven't changed. The money I'm sending isn't obligation, it's love. 20 years of letters, cards, and emails printed out and saved. Love letters from a man who claimed he'd done what was best for everyone by disappearing. Evidence of an emotional affair that had never truly ended, just gone underground." I sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by the detritus of a marriage I now understood had been a sham from the beginning. Each letter revealed another layer of the deception. Marcus declaring his love while I planned family vacations. Celeste responding with her own passionate confessions while sitting across from me at dinner. Photos of Blake that she'd sent to Marcus without my knowledge. Marking milestones in his life that his biological father experienced secondhand while I lived them in real time. The most damning evidence was in the recent correspondence. Email printouts from the past year showed Marcus planning his return, discussing strategy for claiming parental rights, and coordinating with Celeste to minimize my role in Blake's life going forward. Once the divorce is final, Marcus had written 3 months ago, "We can finally be a real family. Blake deserves to know his real father, and we deserve to be together after all these years." Celeste's response was equally devastating. "I've wasted 20 years with the wrong man. I can't wait to start our real life together, the wrong man." 20 years of marriage, and she considered me the wrong man. My phone rang, interrupting my discovery. Celeste's name appeared on the screen. "Garrett, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. "In person. There's nothing to discuss. Talk to my attorney, please. This has gone far enough. Can't we work something out?" "For Blake's sake?" I looked down at the love letters scattered around me. "It's interesting that you mentioned Blake. I'm looking at 20 years of evidence that you've been planning to remove me from his life." Silence. Then quietly, "You found the letters." "I found everything, Celeste. The letters, the photos you sent Marcus, the plans you made behind my back. Did you think I'd never discover the truth? It wasn't supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen? You and Marcus were going to ease me out of Blake's life and ride off into the sunset with my money. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been living a double life for 20 years, maintaining an emotional affair with Marcus while taking everything I could give you. The only thing I don't understand is why you married me at all. Her voice broke. Because I was scared and alone, and you were kind and stable, and you thought I'd be a good provider while you waited for Marcus to grow up. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain to me how 20 years of love letters to another man while married to me was anything other than exactly what it looks like. I could hear her crying now. I did love you, Garrett. Part of me still does. Which part? The part that forged my signature on insurance documents? The part that hid money in secret accounts? The part that planned to destroy my relationship with Blake? I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Every single day for 20 years. And the worst part is that you're not even sorry. You're just sorry you got caught. What do you want from me? She whispered. I want you to stop pretending you're the victim here. You made choices, Celeste. 20 years of choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. I'll lose everything. You'll lose what was never really yours to begin with. The house I paid for, the money I earned, the life I built while you were planning your exit strategy. What about Blake? Blake gets to decide what relationship he wants with you, but he already knows the truth about who raised him and who abandoned him. After I hung up, I sat among the letters for another hour, reading the chronicle of my own unknowing humiliation. Every anniversary dinner where she seemed distracted. Every family vacation where she spent too much time on her phone. Every time she'd said, I love you, while thinking about another man. The papers would be evidence in court, proof of the sustained deception that had defined our marriage. But more than that, they were closure. They answered the question that had been eating at me since her confession. Whether any of it had been real, now I knew. None of it had been real. I'd been married to a ghost, raising a son while his mother's heart belonged to someone else. But the son part, that was real. Whatever else Marcus and Celeste had stolen from me, they couldn't steal the 20 years of love I'd shared with Blake. That relationship was built on truth, even if everything else was built on lies. Blake called me on a Wednesday evening, his voice tight with frustration. Dad, Marcus wants to meet me. He's been calling all day. I set down the legal brief I'd been reviewing. What did you tell him? That I'd think about it. But honestly, I don't know what to think. Mom's been texting me nonstop, saying he's my real father, and that I should give him a chance. It's messing with my head. What does your gut tell you? My gut tells me that if he wanted to be my father, he had 20 years to figure it out. I thought about the childhood drawing Blake had made in second grade. Stick figures of our family with, "My dad is the best," written in crayon across the top. I'd kept it framed in my office all these years, a simple reminder of what mattered most. Now it felt like a declaration of truth that transcended biology. He sent me something, Blake continued. A package with expensive stuff. A MacBook Pro, concert tickets, some designer clothes. Like he thinks he can buy a relationship. This was exactly what I'd expected from Marcus. Flashy gestures instead of genuine connection. How does that make you feel? Angry. Like he thinks I'm some kid who can be impressed by expensive toys. I worked 3 jobs last summer to buy my laptop. Now he shows up with a better one like it's nothing? You don't have to accept his gifts. I already sent them back. But Dad, there's something else. He wants to take me to Europe this summer. Said we could do a father-son trip, get to know each other. The manipulation was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus was offering everything I couldn't. Unlimited money, exotic travel, the excitement of something new. For a 20-year-old college student, it had to be tempting. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to ask you something first. Do you think I should meet him? The question caught me off guard. After everything Marcus had done, part of me wanted to say absolutely not. But Blake deserved the right to make his own choices, even if they might hurt. I think you should do whatever feels right to you, I said finally. But remember that relationships aren't built on expensive gifts or grand gestures. They're built on showing up day after day, especially when it's hard. Like you did, like any real father would do. Blake was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about when I broke my arm in Little League. You left work in the middle of an important meeting to take me to the hospital. You stayed with me all night because I was scared. I remembered that night vividly. Blake was 8, and the break had required surgery. I'd slept in an uncomfortable hospital chair, waking up every time he stirred. Where was Marcus that night? Blake asked. Probably living his life in California, not even knowing you existed in any real way. That's what I keep coming back to. He knew about me, but he chose not to know me. Now that I'm grown and don't need actual parenting, suddenly he wants to be my father? It's easier to love someone from a distance, I said. The real work of being a parent is in the daily stuff. Homework help, driving lessons, cleaning up vomit, worrying about grades and friends and whether you're making good choices. Did you ever regret it? Doing all that work for someone who wasn't biologically yours? The question went straight to my heart. Blake, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of worry, I'd do it all again without hesitation. Biology doesn't make someone your child. Love does. Commitment does. Being there does. I know. And that's why this is easy, actually. Marcus can offer me trips to Europe and expensive gifts, but he can't offer me 20 years of memories. He can't offer me the security of knowing that no matter what happens, my dad will be there for me. Relief flooded through me. So you've made your decision? I'm going to meet him. Once. I figure I owe myself that much, to look him in the eye and understand who he is. But I'm not looking for a father. I already have one. And if he tries to pressure you into more, then I'll tell him what I told Mom when she called crying about how you're stealing me away from my real family. I'll tell him that my real family is the one that chose to love me every day for 20 years, not the one that chose to ignore me until it became convenient. After we hung up, I sat in my office looking at Blake's childhood drawing. My dad is the best, written in a 7-year-old's careful script. It had been true then, and apparently it was still true now. Marcus could offer Blake the world, but he couldn't offer him what mattered most, a lifetime of unconditional love and consistent presence. That was something you couldn't buy or fake or suddenly decide to provide. Blake had made his choice, and he'd chosen the man who'd earned the title of father through 20 years of showing up. Blood might be thicker than water, but love was thicker than blood. Catherine's office felt different this time, charged with the energy of impending victory. The prenuptial agreement draft sat between us on her mahogany desk, its pages representing a strategic masterpiece designed to protect everything I'd worked for. It's unconventional, Catherine admitted, but given the circumstances, it's brilliant. We're essentially creating a retroactive prenup that accounts for the fraud that invalidated your marriage contract. The document was comprehensive. In exchange for a quiet, uncontested divorce, Celeste would receive a settlement of $50,000, enough to start over but nowhere near the millions she might have claimed in a traditional divorce. More importantly, she would sign away any future claims to my assets, my business, or Blake's inheritance. What if she refuses? I asked. Catherine's smile was sharp. Then we go to trial, and she gets to explain 20 years of adultery, financial fraud, and paternity deception to a judge. We have the love letters, the forged insurance documents, the hidden accounts, and the ongoing conspiracy with Marcus. She'll be lucky to get anything. My phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. Please. Can we meet? I'm losing everything. She's getting desperate, I said, showing Catherine the message. Good. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also sometimes make smart choices. Let's give her one last chance to be smart. I arranged to meet Celeste at the same coffee shop where I'd confronted Marcus. She arrived 20 minutes late, looking haggard and older than her 45 years. Her usual polished appearance was gone. No makeup, hair pulled back carelessly, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Thank you for coming, she said. Sliding into the seat across from me, I placed the prenuptial agreement draft on the table between us. Catherine thought you should see this before we file the formal papers. She picked up the document with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the terms. I watched her face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally resignation as she understood the full scope of her situation. $50,000, she said quietly. After 20 years of marriage. It's generous considering the circumstances. Generous? Her voice cracked. This is my life, Garrett. This is everything I have. No, Celeste. Everything you have belongs to me. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. I earned all of it while you were planning your exit strategy with Marcus. I can't survive on $50,000. You should have thought about that before you committed. Fraud for 2 decades. She looked up from the papers, tears streaming down her face. What about the years I supported your career? The dinners I hosted for your clients, the social events, the lies you told while doing it? I interrupted. Every smile, every handshake. Every aren't we lucky conversation. All of it was performance while you planned to leave me for Marcus. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now you have a choice. Sign this agreement and walk away with something, or fight me in court and lose everything. Celeste stared at the document for a long moment. What about Blake? Blake gets to choose his relationship with you. But he's already made it clear where his loyalty lies. Marcus said he'd take care of me. I almost laughed. Marcus is about to be served with a child support claim for $300,000. He's in no position to take care of anyone. Her face went pale. You're really doing that? I'm really doing that. He wanted to claim parental rights. Fine, he can start by paying what he owes. But his business, his debts, his problem. He should have thought about that before fathering a child he wasn't prepared to support. Celeste was quiet for a long time, staring at the agreement. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I loved you, you know. In the beginning, but not enough to be faithful. Not enough to be honest. Not enough to choose me over him. No, she admitted. Not enough for any of that. I stood to leave. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, Catherine files the contested divorce papers, and you'll be explaining your choices to a judge instead of negotiating with me. And if I sign, then it's over. Clean, quiet, final. You get your $50,000 and the chance to start fresh somewhere else. As I walked away, I heard her call after me. Garrett, I turned back. I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better. Yes, I said. I did. But as I drove home, I realized that sorry wasn't enough anymore. Sorry didn't give me back 20 years of authentic marriage. Sorry didn't erase the humiliation of raising another man's child while he lived consequence-free. Sorry didn't repair the damage done to Blake, who now had to navigate the complicated reality of his parentage. Sorry was just another word from someone who'd lost the right to mean anything to me. The prenuptial agreement would expire at midnight tomorrow. After that, we'd do this the hard way, and everyone would learn exactly what happened when you betrayed someone who understood how to use money as a weapon. Celeste signed the agreement with 10 minutes to spare, but her acceptance came with an unexpected consequence. She tried to control the narrative by posting on social media first. The Facebook post appeared at 11:47 p.m., just before the deadline. I was reviewing final documents when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Screenshots began flooding my messages from friends and colleagues who'd seen her desperate attempt at damage control. Her post read, "After much soul-searching, Garrett and I have decided to separate. Sometimes people grow apart, and we've chosen to end our marriage amicably. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time." The comments section told a different story. Our mutual friends were expressing shock and sympathy, but a few responses stood out. "So sorry, Celeste. You and Garrett seem so happy. Is Blake okay? This must be hard on him. Let me know if you need anything during the transition." But by morning, the narrative had shifted. Someone, I suspected Raymond Cross had contacts in strategic places, had shared additional information. New comments appeared. Heard there's more to this story than meets the eye. My friend works at the courthouse. This isn't amicable. 20 years and she gets almost nothing? That's unusual unless there's fault involved. By noon, the whisper network that governs small professional communities had taken over. My phone rang constantly with colleagues, clients, and friends who'd heard rumors and wanted to know the truth. Marcus's situation was even worse. Someone had shared photos from Raymond's surveillance. Marcus and Celeste together at restaurants. Marcus handing her envelopes of cash. Marcus with his young girlfriend at expensive hotels. The images painted a clear picture of ongoing deception and financial support. The most damaging screenshot showed a comment thread where someone had connected the dots. Wait, isn't Marcus the guy who used to be Garrett's business partner 20 years ago? And now he's dating Garrett's ex-wife? There's definitely more to this story. Within hours, Marcus's professional reputation was in freefall. His California clients began calling Catherine's office, asking questions about his involvement in our divorce. Several major accounts were reportedly considering moving their business elsewhere. The real damage came when someone shared the child support filing. Public records showed Marcus being pursued for 20 years of back support, which meant Blake's parentage was now part of the public narrative. This is spiraling, Catherine told me during our afternoon call. Celeste's trying to manage the optics, but it's backfiring. And Marcus is getting destroyed in both states. Is that a problem for us? Not legally, but the public nature of this might complicate things for Blake. She was right. Blake called that evening, frustrated and embarrassed. "Dad, people are talking about us on campus. Someone recognized my name and asked if I was the kid whose mom cheated with his dad's business partner. It's humiliating. I'm sorry, Blake. I didn't expect it to become this public. It's not your fault. Mom created this mess by posting that stupid Facebook thing. She made it sound like you guys just grew apart, and now people are finding out the real story and feeling like they were lied to." The irony wasn't lost on me. Celeste's attempt to control the narrative had backfired spectacularly, creating exactly the kind of public exposure she'd been trying to avoid by signing the agreement. "How are you handling it?" I asked. "Honestly, part of me is glad people know the truth. I was tired of pretending everything was normal when I knew it wasn't. At least now I don't have to keep secrets. The next morning brought the final piece of the puzzle. Marcus's ex-wife in California had apparently seen the news coverage and decided to share her own story. Her Facebook post was brief but devastating. Seeing all this coverage of Marcus Caldwell reminded me why I divorced him. Serial cheater, financial manipulator, and deadbeat dad to his own legitimate children. The man owes me 3 years of back alimony. Good luck to anyone trying to get money out of him. The post was shared hundreds of times within hours, creating a comprehensive picture of Marcus as someone who consistently avoided his financial and parental responsibilities. By afternoon, Marcus's phone calls to Blake had stopped. His girlfriend had apparently left town. His business was hemorrhaging clients, and his hotel had asked him to settle his bill immediately. 20 years after running away from consequences, Marcus was finally experiencing what it felt like when the truth caught up with you in the age of social media. Celeste, meanwhile, had deactivated all her social accounts and wasn't answering her phone. The woman who'd tried to control the story of our divorce had lost control completely. I felt no satisfaction in their public humiliation, only a sense that justice sometimes came in forms you didn't expect. They'd both built their lives on deception and assumed they could manage the truth indefinitely. The internet had taught them otherwise. The divorce decree arrived on a Tuesday morning, its official seal and judicial signature representing the legal end of 20 years of deception. Judge Patricia Morrison had reviewed our uncontested filing and approved the settlement terms exactly as negotiated. Catherine called within an hour of the decree being filed. "It's done," she said with satisfaction. "Clean, complete, and final. Celeste gets her $50,000 and you keep everything else." I held the document in my hands, reading the official language that dissolved my marriage. Irreconcilable differences due to adultery and fraud was the stated reason. Legally preserving the truth while avoiding the sensational details that had already consumed social media. What about the Marcus situation? Even better news there. California accepted our child support filing and they've frozen his assets pending payment. His business accounts, his property investments, even that expensive Mercedes, all of it's tied up until he settles the claim. How much does he actually owe? $312,000 in back support, plus interest and penalties. California guidelines are very specific about what fathers owe for their children's upbringing. The irony was perfect. Marcus had spent 20 years avoiding responsibility while I'd carried the full financial burden of raising Blake. Now the state was forcing him to pay retroactively for every year he'd been absent. Can he afford it? Catherine's laugh was sharp. Not even close. His business is bankrupt, his properties are over-leveraged, and his ex-wife is also pursuing him for unpaid alimony. He'll probably have to liquidate everything and still won't cover what he owes. What happens then? Then he gets to learn what financial responsibility feels like. Garnished wages, seized assets, ruined credit, the full consequences of his choices. After hanging up with Catherine, I called Blake to share the news. He was between classes at Stanford, but he had a few minutes to talk. "How do you feel about it?" he asked after I explained the divorce settlement. Relieved, mostly. It's finally over, and Marcus having to pay. I considered the question carefully. Justice, I suppose. He chose to avoid responsibility for 20 years. Now he gets to face all of it at once. Good, Blake said firmly. I know it sounds harsh, but he deserves whatever he gets. You didn't ask to raise someone else's child, but you did it anyway because you're a good man. He should have to pay for abandoning his responsibilities. What about your mother? Blake was quiet for a moment. I feel sorry for her, honestly. She made terrible choices, but $50,000 isn't much to start over with at 45. I hope she figures out how to build something real this time. His maturity impressed me. Despite everything Celeste had done, Blake still had compassion for her situation. Are you going to maintain a relationship with her? Probably. She's still my mom, even if she lied about everything else. But it'll be different now. I know who she really is. That evening, I sat in my home office, now truly my home since Celeste had moved out the week before, and reviewed the complete legal resolution. The divorce decree was just one document in a stack that included asset transfer paperwork giving me sole ownership of the house business documents confirming my complete control of Whitmore Financial Services, Blake's education trust, now irrevocably protected from any future claims Marcus's child support judgment. Ensuring 20 years of consequences, everything I'd worked for was protected. Everything Blake needed for his future was secure. Everyone who'd betrayed me was facing appropriate consequences. But as I looked around the empty house, I realized that victory felt different than I'd expected. The silence was profound. No sound of Celeste moving around upstairs. No casual conversations over dinner. No shared routines that had defined our daily life. I'd won, but winning meant I was alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Blake. "Dad, I know this has been hard, but I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done. You saved me from growing up with people who don't understand what love actually means. Thank you for being my real father." I read the message twice, feeling something warm settle in my chest. I wasn't alone. I had a son who chose me every day, who understood the difference between biology and love, who valued character over convenience. The divorce decree was just a piece of paper. The real victory was in the relationship that had survived the lies and emerged stronger because it was built on truth. Marcus could keep his expensive watch and his young girlfriend, at least until the state seized his assets. Celeste could start over with her settlement and try to build something honest for once. I had something more valuable than either of them would ever understand. A son who knew exactly who his real father was. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Blake surprised me by driving up from Stanford for an unannounced weekend visit. I found him in the kitchen Saturday morning, making coffee and scrambling eggs like he'd never left home. "This feels weird," he said, gesturing around the space. "Same house, but it feels completely different." He was right. I'd redecorated after Celeste moved out, replacing her feminine touches with simpler, more masculine choices. But the biggest change was less tangible. The house felt honest now, free from the undercurrent of deception that had poisoned the atmosphere for 20 years. "I have something for you," Blake said, pulling out a lease agreement from his backpack. "I'm moving off campus next semester. Found a nice 2-bedroom apartment near Stanford. I reviewed the paperwork. A modern complex with reasonable rent, close to campus but independent. This looks good." "Smart choice. The thing is, I was hoping you might visit sometimes. Maybe we could have some real father-son time without all the drama." The lease represented something I'd never had with Blake, a relationship free from Celeste's mediation and Marcus's shadow presence. For 20 years, every interaction had been filtered through lies. Now we could build something authentic. "I'd love that," I said. "Though I should warn you, I'm probably going to be embarrassingly proud when I visit." Blake grinned. "I'm counting on it. I want people to meet my dad and understand exactly who raised me." We spent the weekend doing ordinary things, watching football, grilling steaks, talking about his classes and future plans. But everything felt extraordinary because it was real. No secrets, no hidden agendas, no careful navigation around topics that might reveal uncomfortable truths. "Have you heard from Mom?" he asked Sunday morning. "No, have you?" "She calls once a week. She's living in Arizona now, working for her sister's real estate business. Says she's trying to build something honest for the first time in her life. How do you feel about that?" Blake considered the question while sipping his coffee. "I hope she succeeds. I really do. But I also don't feel responsible for her happiness anymore." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. You're allowed to love someone and still maintain boundaries." "What about Marcus? Any word on his situation?" I'd been following Marcus's legal troubles through Catherine, who occasionally updated me on the child support case. Last I heard, he'd lost his business and was working for someone else's firm. The state garnishes most of his wages for the support payments. Good. He's finally learning what responsibility feels like. After Blake returned to school, I found myself thinking about new beginnings more often. The house was quiet but peaceful. My business was thriving. Several new clients had actually sought me out after hearing about how I'd handled my divorce. Impressed by my strategic approach to protecting assets, I'd started dating again, something that felt strange after 20 years of marriage. But there was something liberating about meeting people who knew nothing about my past, who saw me as I was now rather than as part of a couple built on lies. The most significant change was internal. For the first time in decades, I felt completely authentic. No more wondering if conversations were genuine. No more analyzing every interaction for hidden meanings. No more living with the nagging sense that something was wrong, even when I couldn't identify what. I'd learned that truth was more valuable than comfort, that being alone was better than being deceived, and that real love, like what Blake and I shared, could survive any revelation because it was built on genuine foundations. Blake's apartment lease wasn't just a document about student housing. It was a symbol of our freedom to build a relationship based on who we actually were, rather than who we'd been told we were supposed to be. 20 years of lies had cost me a marriage, but they'd given me something more valuable. The knowledge that some relationships are strong enough to survive absolute honesty. Those are the relationships worth keeping. The therapy session notes arrived in my mailbox on a Thursday afternoon. forwarded by Blake with a handwritten note. Dad, I thought you should see this. Mom gave me permission to share it with you. It's heavy, but maybe it will help you understand. The pages were photocopies of Dr. Sarah Chen's session notes from Celeste's court-mandated therapy following what Blake described as a breakdown 3 months after our divorce was finalized. The clinical language couldn't hide the raw pain documented in the sessions. Patient exhibits severe depression and anxiety following divorce proceedings. The notes began. Expresses deep regret about choices made over 20-year period. Reports feeling completely lost and like I don't know who I am when I'm not lying. I sat in my home office, reading the chronicle of Celeste's psychological unraveling. The woman I'd been married to for 2 decades had apparently never existed. Even she didn't know who she really was beneath the layers of deception. Session after session revealed the depth of her self-destruction. Patient admits to creating elaborate fantasies about her relationship with Marcus while married to Garrett. Acknowledges that the love she felt was largely projection and escapism rather than reality. When asked about genuine feelings for husband, patient becomes emotional. States, I think I convinced myself I didn't love him because loving him would have made the lying unbearable. Patient expresses intense guilt about Blake, whom she describes as the innocent victim of my selfishness. Reports daily anxiety about whether she destroyed his ability to trust people. The most devastating entry was from a session 6 weeks into her treatment. Patient attempted self-harm last week. States she can't live with what I've done to the 2 people who love me most. Immediate intervention required. Discussing inpatient treatment options, I set the papers down, feeling something I hadn't expected. Pity. For 20 years I'd seen Celeste as manipulative and calculated. These notes revealed someone who'd been drowning in her own deceptions, creating lies to escape from previous lies until she'd lost any sense of authentic self. My phone rang. Blake's name appeared on the screen. Did you read them? He asked without preamble. I read them. How is she now? Better, I think. The medication helps with the depression, and she's been in therapy for 8 months. But Dad, she's not the same person. It's like the divorce forced her to face who she really was, and she couldn't handle it. Are you okay with her sharing this with me? She asked me to. Said you deserved to know that her breakdown wasn't manipulation. It was genuine consequence. She wanted you to understand that she knows exactly what she cost all of us. I thought about the woman who'd sat across from me in that coffee shop, begging for understanding. I'd seen her desperation as strategic, another attempt to manipulate the situation. These notes suggested it had been genuine terror at facing the wreckage of her choices. Blake, do you think I was too harsh? The question surprised me even as I asked it. 6 months ago, I'd felt completely justified in every action I'd taken. Now, reading about Celeste's psychological collapse, I wondered if justice and cruelty were sometimes separated by a thinner line than I'd realized. No, Blake said firmly. You protected yourself and me from people who'd been lying to us for 20 years. You didn't cause Mom's breakdown, her choices did. The fact that facing consequences was traumatic for her doesn't mean you were wrong to impose them. But she almost hurt herself because she couldn't handle the weight of what she'd done. That's not your fault, Dad. You didn't create 20 years of lies. You just stopped enabling them. After we hung up, I sat with the therapy notes for another hour. They painted a picture of someone who'd been as trapped by her deceptions as I'd been victimized by them. Celeste had spent 20 years running from the truth about her choices, and when the running stopped, the reckoning had nearly destroyed her. I felt no satisfaction in her suffering. The goal had been justice, not destruction. But I also couldn't feel responsible for consequences that flowed directly from her decisions. The notes ended with a more hopeful entry from her most recent session. Patient reports feeling more honest than I've ever been in my life. States, I'm finally learning who I am when I'm not pretending to be someone else. It's terrifying but also freeing. Significant progress noted in accepting responsibility without deflecting blame. Maybe that was enough. Maybe Celeste's breakdown had been necessary for her to find authenticity. Maybe my calculated response had been harsh, but proportional to 20 years of systematic deception. I locked the therapy notes in my desk drawer. They were a reminder that consequences, even justified ones, ripple through lives in ways we can't always predict or control. The question wasn't whether I'd been right to protect myself and Blake. The question was whether I could live with being the kind of person who imposed consequences without taking pleasure in others' pain. Looking around my honest house, thinking about my authentic relationship with Blake, I decided I could live with that person just fine. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, Blake graduated from Stanford with highest honors. I sat in the auditorium watching him walk across the stage, feeling a pride so pure it almost hurt. When they called his name, Blake Whitmore, he looked directly at me and smiled. Later, at the graduation party in his apartment, Blake handed me a framed photograph. It was the two of us from that weekend, standing together in his kitchen, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember. But what struck me was how relaxed we both looked. No tension, no hidden knowledge, no careful navigation around dangerous topics. "I wanted you to have this," Blake said. "It's the first picture I have where we both look completely honest." The photograph joined the collection on my desk. Blake's childhood drawing declaring me the best dad, his graduation photo, and now this image of who we'd become when freed from other people's deceptions. "Any word from your mother?" I asked. "She sent a card. Said she's proud of me and wishes she could have been here." Blake's tone was neutral, neither bitter nor particularly warm. "She's doing better, apparently. Got a real estate license and is working for herself now. Says she's finally learning to build something without lying about the foundation." "How do you feel about that?" "Happy for her, I guess. Everyone deserves a chance to be authentic, even if it takes them 46 years to figure out how." The party was small. Blake's closest friends from college, a few professors who'd become mentors, and me. No extended family drama, no complicated relationships to navigate. Just people who knew and cared about Blake for who he actually was. As the evening wound down, one of Blake's friends asked about his plans. "Starting a master's program in business at Northwestern in the fall," Blake said. "Want to follow in my dad's footsteps and become a financial advisor." The pride I felt was immediate and profound. Not because he was following my career path, but because he'd chosen it freely, without pressure or expectation. "Any particular reason?" his friend asked. Blake glanced at me before answering. "My dad taught me that money is really about trust. People trusting you to handle their financial future responsibly. After everything our family went through, I understand how important that trust is and how much damage it causes when someone betrays it." Later, after the guests had left and we were cleaning up, Blake brought up a subject we'd both been avoiding. "Marcus called me last week," he said casually while loading the dishwasher. I stopped wiping down the counter. "What did he want?" "To apologize mostly. Said he'd been in therapy too and wanted to make amends for abandoning his responsibilities. Asked if I'd be willing to have a relationship with him now that he's learned to be honest." "What did you tell him?" Blake smiled, and I saw something of myself in his expression. Measured, thoughtful, but firm. I told him that I appreciate his apology, but some consequences are permanent. He chose not to be my father for 20 years. I don't need him to figure out how to be one now. How did he take that? "About as well as you'd expect. Said he understood, but hoped I'd change my mind someday." Blake shrugged. "Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But it'll be my choice, made for my reasons, not his." The conversation reminded me of something Dr. Chen had written in Celeste's therapy notes. Healing doesn't require forgiveness, and forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Blake had found his own path to healing, not through forgiveness or reconciliation, but through understanding and choice. He knew who his real father was, and that knowledge was enough. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the year that had transformed everything. I'd lost a marriage built on lies, but gained a relationship built on truth. I'd discovered that being alone was better than being deceived. That authentic connections were more valuable than comfortable illusions. Marcus had learned that consequences delayed were not consequences avoided. Celeste had learned that authenticity, however painful, was the only foundation for genuine relationships. Blake had learned that family was about choice and commitment, not biology. And I had learned that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing were the same thing. The house I returned to was quiet, but not lonely. It was honest, peaceful, and mine. Tomorrow, Blake would start his adult life with a clear understanding of who he was and who had earned the right to be called family. In my desk drawer, alongside the legal documents that had ended my marriage, I kept Blake's childhood drawing and our graduation photo. Evidence that some relationships were strong enough to survive any truth, and that those were the only relationships worth having. 20 years of lies had cost me everything I thought I wanted, but they'd given me everything I actually needed. A son who chose me every day, and the knowledge that authentic love was worth any price I'd had to pay to find it. The new family photo would have just 2 people in it, but it would be completely, beautifully real.